Good morning. Welcome to the American Enterprise Institute. My apologies that we are running a few minutes late. Those of you in the room have had the opportunity to benefit from our wonderful pastries and coffee, so I feel even more apologetic to the people who are watching on the live stream. But thank you all for being here, and thanks to those who are joining us online. Thanks also to those who will watch the video of this event later on this week at a time of their convenience. I'm Michael Strain, Director of Economic Policy Studies here at the American Enterprise Institute. The theme of this morning's event, the Transatlantic Partnership in a Changing World, a conversation with Valdis Dombrovskis. Europe faces challenges, small and large, economic and geopolitical, and new and old. Russia's war against Ukraine has dragged on for more than 3.5 years. The second Trump administration has levied sweeping tariffs and redefined the trade relationship between the U.S. and the EU. And economic and political headwinds across the continent have motivated European policy members to adopt new strategies to shore up competitiveness and security. Given these challenges, I am delighted to welcome Mr. Dombrovskis, the Commissioner for Economy and Productivity and for Implementation and Simplification of the European Commission, for a conversation about the pressing challenges that Europe faces, the frictions and possibilities in the U.S.-EU relationship, and the future of the transatlantic partnership. The relationship between Europe and the United States is crucial. It advances prosperity on both sides of the Atlantic and is a foundation of global peace and stability. At times like these, when cooperation between governments has frictions, institutions like the American Enterprise Institute play an even more vital role than ever at maintaining ties, maintaining friendships, facilitating commerce, and facilitating stability. The run of show for this event is straightforward. The Commissioner will come to the podium and deliver remarks, after which him and my colleague, Stan Veuger, will have a conversation. Following that, the Commissioner will take questions from the audience. Let me introduce both of our speakers. Stan Veuger is a senior fellow in economic policy studies at the American Enterprise Institute, where he is the editor of AEI Economic Perspectives. He is also a visiting lecturer of economics at Harvard University and an affiliate of Harvard's Center for American Political Studies. Dr. Veuger serves as a director of the Netherlands American Foundation and as a member of its executive committee. Valdis Dombrovskis is Commissioner for Economy and Productivity and Commissioner for Implementation and Simplification at the European Commission. Prior to assuming these offices in 2024, he was European Commission Executive Vice President, responsible for an economy that works for people, with responsibility for trade. He has held other important positions at the European Commission. He was a member of the European Parliament, and he served as both the Finance Minister and the Prime Minister of Latvia. Commissioner Dombrovskis, welcome, and let me welcome you to the stage.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. It's a great honor to return to this forum and contribute to the American Enterprise Institute's discussions on challenges that are defining our age. For decades, the importance of transatlantic partnership was an article of faith. As President Reagan put it, preservation of a peaceful, free, and democratic Europe is essential to the preservation of a peaceful, free, and democratic United States. But times change. Today's world is witnessing major geopolitical shifts. Russia is waging war on continental Europe and has violated EU and NATO's airspace on a great number of occasions. This is unprecedented in recent history. China is flexing its muscles using trade interdependencies for political gain. There is one can say, anti-Western coalition building. In this new context, I am convinced that Europe must take greater responsibility for its own destiny while upholding and safeguarding the deep and enduring partnership with the US. Ladies and gentlemen, A great British statesman, Lord Palmerston, once observed that there is no such thing as permanent friends nor enemies, only permanent interests. The truth is, beyond a shared history and common values such as freedom, democracy, peace, the rule of law, the transatlantic partnership has always been based on common interests. Today, I would like to offer my reflections on the strategic interests that still bind the US and Europe together in a rapidly changing world. Firstly, I believe that peace and stability in Europe has always been in the vital economic interest of the United States. In the aftermath of Second World War, American financing helped to rebuild Western Europe, creating a vibrant new market that helped fuel the growth of America's booming industries. And America's massive investment in Europe continues to generate remarkable returns so that today, no other two regions in the world are as deeply integrated. In 2023, US-owned assets in Europe were worth an estimated $19.2 trillion, accounting for roughly 64% of corporate America's total foreign assets globally. Sales by the European affiliates of US companies reached a record high of $3.9 trillion. And we are determined to make Europe an even more attractive place to do business for American companies by cutting red tape, reducing energy costs, and eliminating the remaining barriers within Europe's single market. Transatlantic trade in goods and services has doubled over the last decade, surpassing 1.6 trillion euros in 2023. That is over 4.4 billion euros of goods and services crossing Atlantic every day, providing not only end-sale products, but also critical inputs for each other's economies. These include critical inputs for the US future economy, from Scandinavia's 6G expertise and Germany's industrial robotics to Dutch chip-making machines. The US is already by far the European Union's first supplier of LNG, with 55% of our LNG coming from the US so far this year. And this share is expected to increase to around 70% in a period 2026 to 2029. Given the numbers I just mentioned, American companies and people clearly have a strong stake in the stability and success of European economy and in Europe's security. To draw a parallel, speaking on a conclusion on Ukraine-US Mineral Resources Agreement, Secretary Bessent stated his belief that the agreement was a win-win for both sides. It meant, and I quote, "The American people have a stake in the recovery of the Ukrainian economy." For US corporate interests, Europe as a market, a host of assets, and a crucial link in integrated supply chains is simply too big to ignore. So Putin's aggression, his threats, his brutal rocket and Shahed drone attacks on civilians, his hybrid attacks on critical infrastructure and so on, are not only abhorrent crimes and a moral outrage, this is also bad for business. As a source of deep uncertainty, they affect the bottom line. This is a crucial consideration for US foreign policy makers to keep in mind. This brings me to the Transatlantic Security Partnership. Despite consistent calls from the US, including President Trump, to increase Europe's defense spending, many in Europe did not see urgency to act. Once the Cold War was over, we hoped for the best rather than preparing for the worst. That era of naivete came to a conclusive end in February 2022 when Russia launched its brutal full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We see today that Russia is refusing to engage in good faith negotiations for lasting peace in Ukraine, despite President Trump's efforts. On the contrary, following discussions in Alaska, Russian attacks against Ukrainian civilians have only intensified. Of course, Russia's ambitions have always extended well beyond Ukraine. In recent weeks, we have witnessed an intensification of Russian efforts to test, probe, and intimidate with consistent violations of EU and NATO airspace. We have also seen cyber attacks, sabotage, and other violations targeting key infrastructure such as airports. Moscow is actively targeting the ways through which we connect every day. European countries are taking action to respond to this reality, and we thank the US for its support. At the recent Hague summit, NATO allies committed to investing 5% of GDP annually on core defense requirements as well as defense and security-related spending by 2035. The EU has created fiscal space to help mobilize up to 800 billion euros in additional defense spending over the next 4 years. This includes the EU's new 150 billion euros SAFE instrument to finance investments in key areas such as missile defense, drones, and cybersecurity. The aim is to build by 2030 a sufficiently strong defense posture to credibly deter our adversaries and respond to any aggression. Europe's permanently higher defense spending creates scale and predictability to develop Europe's own defense industrial base. It is also a game changer for a global defense industry, unleashing a huge new source of demand. And here there is an obvious potential for cooperation. Europe needs to rearm, and the US is the world's largest supplier of advanced weapons. Of course, Europe must have complete confidence in partners that supply the arms we use to defend ourselves, especially now as Russia escalates its brinkmanship. There is no room for doubt. Signaling in this context matters, and in this sense, we welcome, for example, a strong bipartisan support in the Senate for the National Defense Authorization Act. It attests to the US commitment to its Eastern European allies, including commitment to 3 years financing of the Baltic Security Initiative to further strengthen the defensive capabilities of the Baltic states. This is an important contribution towards maintaining a transatlantic partnership built on trust and comes at a pivotal moment. We hope that the final version of the bill that passes into law maintains these commitments. Because Xi Jinping, Kim Jong-un, and Vladimir Putin are bound together by their determination to reshape the global geopolitical landscape in their favor. Ukrainians face the brutal reality of this partnership every day. Russia's war machine is sustained by North Korean conscripts, Iranian drones, and Chinese supply complicity. We know that the aspirations of this partnership and its consequences reverberate well beyond Kyiv. Ask yourself this: why does the Kremlin invest so many resources on social media efforts to plant division between Europe and the US and within our societies? Well, because they stand to benefit most from the West being distracted and divided by the war. Actions speak louder than the words. Supporting Ukraine until a just and lasting peace is reached sends a signal that the US and the EU are willing and able to confront challenges of our vital strategic interests together. Not just from Russia, but whenever they emerge. Take the Arctic Ocean, a new area of geopolitical competition. As it becomes more navigable for longer, enhanced US-European cooperation can help counter Russian and Chinese influence. It is also about capacity and experience in operating in the Arctic. Finland, for example, can provide a know-how to deliver icebreaker ships at a large scale and at acceptable cost. I do not know where the next crisis will emerge and what form will it take, but I do know that it is in our mutual interest to be on the same side when it arrives, and that our adversaries are working every single day against that. Scale matters more than ever. The US can deliver scale, and the EU can also deliver scale, but only together we can deliver an ineluctably large scale. Europe now recognizes that our shared prosperity and way of life depend on maintaining our security. We are finally answering to the call to permanently increase our defense spending and to develop our defense industry. In doing so, we are stepping up to the plate, investing to become a more equal and reliable security partner for the United States. Maintaining security is a burden best shared, both to reduce its cost to the US and to improve its efficiency. So, in the Arctic Circle, the North Atlantic, or even South China Sea, we have a joint interest and in working together to counter threats. Throughout the Cold War, the US-led international order and the alliances it maintained helped to ensure the US held its advantage and eventually emerged victorious. Today, we face another formidable challenger. China has made remarkable strides, either rapidly catching up or even outperforming the US and the EU in certain economic and technological domains. In effectively competing with China, unilateralism has clear limits, even for the United States. On the other hand, the US, acting with the support of allies, generates advantages that China cannot match alone. In practical terms, leveraging these partnerships can maximize our capacities in everything from producing ships and artillery shells to limiting the spread of advanced technologies to rivals. The EU stands ready to assure greater responsibilities in consolidating an international order that can maximize our advantages. And to tell you the truth, there is a high demand for such leadership. Over the last year, we have been busy strengthening and diversifying our trade network, reaching new deals with Mercosur, Mexico, Switzerland, and most recently Indonesia, while advancing negotiations with India, Thailand, the United Arab Emirates, among others. This trade network has the potential to form the basis of a coalition of like-minded partners and advance common strategic interests. We believe that enhancing trade deepens our partnerships also in other areas. Europe believes that broad partnerships and cooperation based on shared interests can make us more than the sum of our parts. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, given the extent and nature of our joint interests, I believe, to paraphrase the great Mark Twain, that the reports on the transatlantic partnership's demise have been greatly exaggerated. But we must not lose sight of what we can achieve together and stand to lose apart. I hope that I convince you that our partnership does not belong to the past. It remains vital today and in the future. Both our shared history and values underpinning our partnership and our mutual interests must continue to push us together. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Go right here. Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for coming back to AEI. Appreciate your comments. I would like to start with a topic that you both started and ended your speech with, trade policy. The EU and the US have reached an agreement of sorts on where trade policy should go. How stable do you think the situation is right now?
Indeed. So in August, we reached and agreed the EU-US joint statement on trade, and from the EU side, we are working to faithfully implement this agreement. Also on US side, there had been practical steps taken. So tariffs which on number of occasions were higher, like for example car tariffs, which already stood at 27.5%, now stand at 15%. So also we see steps from US in implementing this agreement. But all in all, well, one has to say that we work in circumstances of elevated trade uncertainty globally. So something we obviously must remain agile, but we believe that we have a strong economic interest to work together and to stick to the agreements reached, because EU-US trade relationships are the largest in the world, so there is lots of at stake economically.
So one component of the statement that I think has people somewhat confused, and that's not just true for the agreement or framework agreement between the US and the EU, but also for Japan and South Korea, are the investment commitments that the Commission made. Can you talk more about this, about those? Are they similar to the commitments Japan and South Korea made? How binding are they? How much say does the United States government have over those investments?
Well, on those investment commitments, primarily it concerns private sector investments in US. In a sense, those are indicative targets, and from EU side, we work in a sense to facilitate that this is happening and taking place. There are also other commitments, for example, on larger purchases on US energy. So we commit to purchase some extra $750 billion worth of US energy sources. I already was mentioning that we expect the share of US LNG imports to increase quite substantially in our import structure, so up to 70%. So from EU side, we are obviously willing to make this statement and commitments in the statement a reality.
And so when you say facilitate private sector investments, what does that mean in practice?
Obviously, in a sense, as European Commission, we cannot dictate the private sector, you have to invest there and this much and for that purposes. But we can see, in a sense, what are obstacles to transatlantic investment, how to remove those obstacles, how to make our companies stronger and thriving in this transatlantic partnership. As I said, those are indicative target, because at the end of the day, yes, investment decisions, concrete investment decisions, will be for companies to take. It's not something we will, decide from the European Commission side.
So you close your remarks by talking about various trade agreements that either the EU has reached or is in the process of reaching with really a large set of countries and organizations, with Mercosur, with Mexico, with India. Some may see that as an attempt to build a new rules-based trade order that does not involve either the US or China. Is that the vision?
Well, first of all, I also said it in my speech, we believe in a rules-based multilateral order. We had been always committed, if we talk specifically on trade, on rules-based multilateral trading order, but we had also been working intensively also on our bilateral trade agreements and also of other forms of partnerships, for example, like raw material partnerships, which are, I would say, very topical right now, and other possibilities. So already prior to those agreements, which we concluded over the last year or so, we had a world's most extensive network of free trade agreements, and we continue to expand this. And what we see is that indeed this elevated trade uncertainty which we are facing is helping to concentrate minds both in the EU and also in our partner countries of the need of those kind of partnerships. And with the EU single market of 450 million consumers and 26 million companies, we have a lot to offer to our partners also in terms of market access. So at the end of the day, we are reaching win-win partnerships, and we believe that resilience also comes through diversification, and that's exactly what we are achieving.
I see. And would you say that sense of urgency, obviously, it's driven in part by the rapid changes in U.S. trade policy. Is it also the discovery, I'd say, this year of the sort of lack of ability the EU has had to really respond to U.S. trade actions, that because of the link that's now been established with the security relationship, it's been difficult for the EU to retaliate. It's been, just this week we saw that the U.S. government basically forced the Dutch government to remove the CEO of a Dutch company. Are you trying to rebuild autonomy in the trade sphere in an attempt to separate your most important trade relationships from the transatlantic security relationship, or am I overreading it a bit?
Well, I think this indeed a bit over-reading the situation, because from EU side we continue to be committed to transatlantic partnership. We believe it's indispensable both for economic and geopolitical reasons, and my whole speech was about that.
Of course.
But this goal of diversifying our partnerships, in a sense, was something we had been pursuing also before. As I was mentioning, already before those last agreements, we already had a most comprehensive network of free trade agreements, and we were negotiating many of them. And in a sense, the negotiations with also the Mercosur and Mexico were ongoing already for years, so it was not something new. In a sense, what was happening with this elevated trade uncertainty coming from President Trump administration, that probably kind of provided this final impulse to actually get those agreements over the line.
Very good. Let's talk about the security relationship then, and about the security situation in Europe generally. How do you see the path forward for Russia's war against Ukraine?
Well, for Russia's war against Ukraine, it's clear that it's key that we are achieving the just and lasting peace in Ukraine. That's key for entire European security architecture, because Russia is openly talking about invading other countries, including EU and NATO countries. So if they feel halfway successful in Russia, that will only encourage, say, further kind of imperialist expansion. And other authoritarian regimes are watching as well. In a sense, if the message of the Western democratic world is that we cannot contain even Russia, well, good luck with containing China. So I think it has also wider implications, because it's not only about European security, but the world is watching how much the collective West is able and willing to do, and to which extent it's willing to uphold a rules-based international order, or we are just sliding into a world where might is right.
And so you spoke about the EU, or EU member states, European NATO member states, preparing themselves to be able to defend themselves by 2030. So how concerned are you about the 5 years between now and then? That's a long period of time.
Well, and okay, we have started already now. So this week we, in a sense, intend to adopt the defense readiness strategy, outlining how we strengthen this defense readiness by 2030. But it means starting now, and many countries have already increased the defense expenditure quite substantially, especially countries which are actually bordering the aggressor Russia. And also at the European level, important decisions had been already taken, including providing more flexibility for EU member states in our fiscal rules, that they can actually invest more in defense. This 150 billion euros joint borrowing safe program, again for defense procurement for member states. There are other initiatives accompanying this. We are looking specifically at eastern flank, so this what we call Eastern Flank Watch, and which includes so-called wall of drones to fight against Russian drone and other incursions in our airspace. So there are many things ongoing right now, and it's very clear, I would say, finally, for everyone in Europe, that Europe must step up its defense readiness and its defense capabilities.
On the drones conflict specifically, there have been a good number of airports that have been shut down in recent months in Europe, at least temporarily, because either there were Russian drones, there was sightings of maybe drones. How optimistic are you that that's not going to get worse?
For that not going to get worse, we need to have the capabilities actually to stop it, because what is happening right now, Russia is kind of testing and probing us. How much we can get. Then it's one drone flying into EU territories, and it was recently in Poland. It was already 19 drones flying in. Yeah. Then there is a fighter jet flying in Estonian airspace. Then there are drones over this or that airport in Europe. So for that to not to get worse, we need to be able to respond decisively, actually take down those drones, be able to, in a sense, follow their origin, take the countermeasures against this. So we must acknowledge that we are already basically at this facing this hybrid warfare from Russia.
Are offensive countermoves on the table? I mean, you could send European drones to the St. Petersburg airport to shut it down. Is that something that's...
We are obviously focusing on our defense capabilities, so certainly it's not that their intention, that there are any aggressive intentions from the EU or NATO, but what I believe is that we must be really firm and determined in our defense response, showing Russia that these kind of provocations will not be tolerated.
On defense spending, obviously different NATO member states have agreed to up their spending. The EU is trying to facilitate that through various fiscal tools. Do you think we're on track? How concerned are you that a lot of the new spending is going to get diverted to not really defense purposes?
What we see that some countries in the EU are already ahead of schedule, like the Baltic states, Poland are already approaching 5% target. Finland is also increasing their defense spending quite actively, and in a sense to ensure that this defense spending really goes into defense, NATO has also now, in a sense, had created two sub-targets. So there is a 3.5% of GDP core defense target, and then a broader 1.5% kind of readiness and resilience target, which both together bring us to the 5% of GDP. So to avoid that, there are many measures which are not really defense. There is a specific, this 3.5% of GDP core defense target. But what I'm seeing, for example, in Baltic states and Poland, they are probably closer to 5% as regards core defense, because, neighborhood with Russia just requires it.
Are you concerned at all that all these increases in spending are going to lead to fiscal issues at the broader European level, upward pressure on interest rates, et cetera? Maybe people start worrying about German bonds if they, if everyone starts spending more, fiscal policy is looser all over the continent?
Well, that's while when we were providing fiscal flexibility, we also framed it both in volumes and time. So basically, what our fiscal flexibility foresees that member states have extra 1.5% of GDP to spend each year of defense for a period of 4 years. And what we're also saying is that member states need to use this period of 4 years to adjust to structurally higher defense spending. So in a sense, they don't need to do it right now under big pressure to think, okay, we need to increase defense, and there are fiscal constraints. Where do we cut expenditure? Do we raise taxes and all this? They have 4 years period to develop kind of an orderly strategy. How, at the end of this period, they will be financing this structurally higher defense spending.
I see. You're very knowledgeable, so I've just asked you about all possible transatlantic topics so far. But let's go to your core portfolio of economy, transparency, simplification. The Draghi report that when it came out made a big splash in Europe, and now there's sort of concrete plans to implement some of its recommendations. For example, you've proposed or are in the process of proposing a 28th regime that of business regulation, I think is how we should think about it, that would give companies the option to opt out of national corporate law, maybe some regulations. Can you talk about how that would work, where that is in the process?
Yeah, maybe before I go into a specific topic, maybe a bit broader word on Europe's competitiveness. So first, when we started the work as this European Commission less than a year ago, we set 2 overarching priorities for this 5 years period, which is security and defense, and which is strengthening competitiveness of European economy. And indeed, that's where the Draghi and also Letta report comes in on how to strengthen the competitiveness. And one of the first initiatives of this European Commission was to launch what we call competitiveness compass, which draws heavily from Draghi report and which actually outlines how do we work across different work streams to improve our competitiveness. And there are many different things we need to do, so it's just not one. First we need to close innovation gap. We need to spend more on research and innovation because other major economies, large economies like US, like China, are just spending more on this. So we need to catch up. We need to address high energy prices because our energy prices again are higher than in other large economies like US and China. So we already developed what we called affordable energy action plan. We need to address bureaucracy, so cut the red tape, and this 28th regime probably fits more in this work stream. Where we are discussing removal of barriers within the single market, because we do have a single market and that's our greatest economic asset, but it's not really functioning perfectly. There are still obstacles to cross-border trade within the EU, both for goods but especially for services. And that's one of the reasons which prevents companies from scaling up in Europe. And so the 28th regime is indeed the initiative to create one set of rules, so one could say kind of a supranational or parallel set of rules so that companies can work under this so-called 28th regime across the entire EU. This way are able to actually use a full scale and scale up inside of the EU.
How would that work in practice? Because presumably those companies would still have to comply with, say, member state level corporate tax legislation. How do you avoid it just becoming an additional layer of corporate regulation?
We're currently working on exact proposal, and indeed there are questions, issues we need to address. Exactly, for example, in areas of taxation, in areas of labor law, and other which are quite sensitive areas. But it's clear that more will be able to streamline that it indeed a 28th regime, not just another kind of layer, the more successful this initiative will be. But of course, I expect that it's not going to be easy discussions also among, for example, EU member states, because the questions, like taxation, like labor law, and so are, quite at the core of member states' competences. But then it's also a kind of economic imperative if we want really to achieve the full scale of EU single market.
One area of corporate regulation in Europe that's very controversial here in the US is tech regulation, Digital Markets Act, Digital Services Act. Do you feel like that's affecting the transatlantic relationship? Are you concerned that the US may try to adopt a very aggressive posture toward those regulations, maybe through trade policy? Is that?
Well, first of all, we believe that each jurisdiction has a right to regulate economic activity and companies doing business in their territory. And that's exactly what we do also with our tech regulation, Digital Services Act, Digital Markets Act, AI Act, and so on. We're, by the way, now working also on certain simplification of this framework. So we expect to come forward with this initiative, which we call Digital Omnibus, by the end of the year, and one can expect some further initiatives also next year, because also European companies are indicating us, on some of the issues they are facing. But okay, the bottom line remains that each jurisdiction retains regulatory autonomy, and just like US is regulating companies on their soil, we are regulating companies on our soil.
So to conclude before we turn to the audience, to conclude my set of questions, as you know, there are quite a few people here in the United States, certainly on the political right, and including in the administration, who are, setting aside the broader transatlantic relation, who are very skeptical of the European Union, and some might argue actively work to undermine it. What would you tell them about the European Union, and why you think it is a good project?
In a sense, I was kind of trying implicitly to respond to this question with my speech, underlining that it's not only our kind of shared history and values which holds us together, because there indeed may be different views, at least in some parts, but it's also major economic and geopolitical interests which are holding us together. So in a sense, we should be looking what are our joint interests and find a ways to work together on them.
Very good. Let's take some questions from the audience. I am staring into very bright lights, so if I do not see your arm, I apologize in advance. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and then I'll point to you, and then you have to wait for the mic. Any takers? Otherwise, I will continue to ask questions. So let's go over there. Please introduce yourself briefly. And then.
Good morning. Good morning, Commissioner. Good morning, Dr. Veuger. My name is Zach. I'm a staff member here at AEI. Why have so few recommendations from the Draghi report been implemented thus far? And how do you see historically low rates of macroeconomic growth within the European Union changing the nature of the transatlantic relationship?
Yes. So first, on the implementation of Draghi report, indeed there is a widely quoted figure that 1 year on the implementation is only 11%, but it must be said that there are many initiatives which European Commission has already put on the table throughout this year. I was mentioning this competitiveness compass, which is kind of, overarching. Also our simplification agenda. And it takes some time, indeed, for all those initiatives, and many of those require also, legislative changes to go through the EU's legislative process. But many of those initiatives are in pipeline, so we'll be seeing them maturing over the next months and so, including on this area of simplification, which I'm also directly dealing with. We expect some important legislation being finalized relatively slow, for example, on sustainability reporting, sustainability due diligence, simplifying those requirements, and other pieces of legislation are following. So that's I would say, is a matter of implementation, and we will see this implementation steadily improving. Then another question on relatively slow growth rates in the EU. Indeed, we had been facing a number of economic shocks in recent years, including economic implications of COVID-19 pandemic, including economic implications of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, which was felt much more in Europe than, say, in US or anywhere else in the world. But we're also facing some structural challenges. For example, our productivity growth is already for decades slower than in other large economies like US and China. And we're looking now at the factors which are affecting our productivity growth and how to change it and how to accelerate it, which brings me back to our competitiveness compass and the agenda which we are implementing through it.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. I'm Lucille, I'm a reporter with Bloomberg News. I wanted to ask on China rare earth curbs. We've had Sivkovic say that the G7 nations should try to coordinate on a response to this. I'm wondering what you think can be done and should be done as a response to the new rare earth curbs. And I'm also wondering what the escalation, the US-China tensions, what kind of spillovers you expect that to have for the EU. Thank you.
Okay. On this second part of the question on the US-China tensions, of course, we have to see how it plays out. But in a sense, we share the concerns now about this major extension on export controls on rare earths, so extending both number of minerals covered by it, but also the entire value chain being covered by those export controls. And indeed, we expect some discussions also at the G7 meeting here in Washington this week to discuss those topics. So there I would be able to say more after those meetings than right now. But in the EU, we are having the same concern. And it's, by the way, not a new concern. We had seen indeed that we have major exposure to Chinese rare earth supplies, and China is dominating this global supply chain on occasions at 80, 90, more than 90%. And that's why already some years ago we started to pursue this strategy of diversification, also of sourcing raw materials, so signing with raw materials partnerships with different countries around the world. But also while setting up our own raw materials strategy, how we are also sourcing more and processing and recycling more of those materials also in European territory. But again, here we believe that the key to resilience is going to be through diversification.
During your speech, you mentioned that Russia puts a lot of effort into poisoning the relationship between the European Union and the United States. Some might argue that it's not just Russia that puts a lot of effort into that the Hungarian government, of course a member state, is quite dedicated to poisoning the relationship between the EU and the US as well. Is that something the Commission has views on, how do you navigate that?
Yes, that's, I would say, a constant concern, because indeed Hungary and Orban administration is kind of an outlier when it concerns the discussions also on EU response to Russia's war of aggression. It always takes a lot of time to convince them to agree to the new sanctions packages, to provide support for Ukraine. For example, right now we are discussing 19th sanctions package, which we need to finalize. We are discussing the reparations loan to Ukraine, which foresees to use cash balances linked with immobilized Russian assets to provide this support for Ukraine. But okay, at the end of the day, we always, so far, were able to reach those agreements despite very difficult discussions, often with Hungary, sometimes also with other member states. So eventually we hope to get them on board also on those next steps.
But they, I mean, at the same time, and I don't think anyone disputes that, they've invested a lot of effort into cultivating, sometimes just straight up paying American commentators to basically criticize the European Union from here within the United States, instead of the Russian approach, which relies a bit more on bots and the like. Is that something that you think the EU should push back against? That, you know, is there have you thought about initiatives to counter that?
Well, as regards this discourse in the EU, indeed, we have certain initiatives to counter, which we call, we have taken what we call, like, a democracy protection initiative, where we are actually dealing with a number of issues, how to counter disinformation, fake news, how to counter, our focus is obviously on Russian propaganda, which I would say is by far the main problem and issue in the EU. I can imagine that a similar discussion could take place in US, in a sense, how to counter this spread of fake news and disinformation, which is unfortunately taking place.
We definitely have the conversation. I don't know if we're pro or con. You mentioned the frozen assets that are being used or may be used to finance reparations for Ukraine. Where in the process? I mean, of course, I think we should just seize those assets to the extent possible. Maybe not nominally, and I believe that is the objective of the Commission as well. How far are we along that road? Have we come up with a legal fiction that lets us seize the assets without saying that we're seizing them?
So what this reparation loan entails, because indeed we have a difficult discussion in the EU about seizing and confiscating those assets, and we are far away from unanimity on this question, and it's not only Hungary which is against, to be clear. But at the same time, there is European Council conclusion. So all 27 EU member states have agreed, and by the way, G7 have agreed the same, that Russian sovereign assets should stay immobilized for as long as Russia has not paid reparations to Ukraine. So the question then becomes, what happens with those assets in between? And what we do with reparation loans, we respond to this question. In between, we keep the Russian claim on sovereign assets, so we are not confiscating, but there are cash balances associated with those immobilized assets which have accumulated, and they have accumulated exactly because those assets are immobilized. So we use those cash balances to provide non-recourse loan to Ukraine, which Ukraine then only needs to pay back once Russia pays reparations. So in theoretical scenario where Russia pays reparations, Ukraine is repaying the loan, we are restoring the cash balance, Russia can claim on their sovereign assets. So that's a scheme which we have proposed and which we are currently discussing. We're actually discussing the same also in G7 framework. On the 1st of October, we agreed on a joint statement that we should be doing this in a coordinated way across G7. So later this week, I also will have a meeting with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to discuss what are specific plans concerning Russian immobilized assets on US territory, and we'll continue this discussion this week also in a G7 setting.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for coming back to AEI. Thank you for your comments, for your answers to all of my questions, and we hope to see you back soon. Good luck this week.
Thank you.